Welcome back to our growing experiment. We're here with Jeff and Daria from Finding Polaris. So we spoke to Daria about a year ago, and now there's quite a few things that have changed. So we invited her back, and we brought Jeff as well, and we'd like to hear updates and how it's going. So do you guys want to maybe give an introduction of Finding Polaris and then introduce yourselves as well?
Sure.
Sure.
You want to do the introduction?
Yeah, I can do. So, Finding Polaris Wilderness Community is a nonprofit that I started about 3 years ago. Definitely as like a heart-led passion project. And over the years, I've learned a bunch, evolved, adapted, and yeah, our focus is to provide skills for resiliency. And that looks both like harder skills. So we teach friction fire or, more outdoor wilderness skills. And then also the skills are also softer skills. So we have community building, truth speaking, awareness skills, really getting into your senses. And yeah, so it's a little bit of both, but to us, they're really not separate. And yeah, in the end, it's to provide more resiliency, more community, and more nature connection in a deeper way than just going for a walk in the woods. And so, yeah, Jeff kind of came along, and now we have a stronger team as two for sure. And yeah, maybe do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
My name's Jeffrey. Um, I guess I'm the more masculine side, I guess you could say. My journey with nature connection's been more of the hiking and hard skill stuff, the kind of romanticized in action movies, the kind of stuff I grew up with. So, the hiking, the survival, preparedness, roughing it. And then when I met Daria, it was more of parts I wanted to do but didn't know how to do, like bringing ceremony into the practice. So making it more um, spiritual for like whatever that means to people, but making it more of like embodying something more than myself. So whatever that is for people, some people say it's God or something that's bigger than us, and kind of bring that piece into it. Kind of went full circle and balanced out my more like yang masculine side and brought the more feminine piece. And then, yeah, we've been just trying to build off of that.
Yes.
So that kind of makes me think in when you're saying that sort of feminine piece, that's sort of a receptive thing. So is that sort of what you learned was a little bit about being receptive in nature and sort of listening, or can you like talk a little bit more of say maybe learning about that feminine side as opposed to that masculine side that you embody?
Definitely. So I would say I was more prone to the like cliche, just like bear through nature, just crashing through trees and stuff, and like throw on a backpack and just run for 5 kilometers through the woods. And a lot of that stuff, like I still find that fun and I love to do that, but definitely the piece of like just staying quiet and maybe just sitting there and observing and taking a minute to not be so like outward and more inward. So a lot of the skills that she taught, like bird language and just subtle things on the landscape that you're not going to pick up if you're just going out there to like burn off all your spare energy that you have from the Monday to Friday grind, and you're just going out to, this is my weekend. I'm going to go out. I'm going to hike. I'm going to climb these mountains. And sometimes I think what I found myself doing a lot, and I think what Daria went through before, was you're going out with your only purpose is like, okay, this is a hike. It's 5 kilometers. We do the circle and then we're done. And then instead of being like going out there and maybe stopping for 10 minutes is just listening, or going in the woods to just meditate, you end up just going, not stopping, and you're almost just like passerby, like a visitor. You're being like the tourist. So you're just going, you're doing the thing, and you're done. Like, okay, that's great. Let's drive home. Whereas, like, I feel like she was more take your time, don't need to rush through things. Like, oh, let's look at this, let's look at that. I don't know if I just trailed off, but
And I would also add to that, for me, it definitely started with that more feminine quality of like really opening up my awareness of what I could even experience. And then with that confidence, then I feel like my harder skills started to show up. So like hide tanning or animal butchering or friction fire, I would say, is like a very masculine thing. It's like it's hard, it's challenging. Um and so I would say we both have both, and they show up in different ways for sure. Um, but yeah, I think once you hone in one energy, in some ways, the challenge to finding balance is also seeing how the other side can be expressed through you as a person. So yeah, it's nice to have both, just me and Jeff, who are totally two different people, and yet there's that complementary nature to how we show up. Yeah.
Yeah, on the other side, like the feminine side, it sort of sounds like a way of knowing how to like just be in nature and sort of like be or like sort of like you're being receptive and you're experiencing everything sort of as it is. Where on the other side, the masculine side, it sounds like you kept saying like you're going and you're doing this or whatever, like there's a plan, like it's like you're getting something out of it sort of in a way. It's well, I mean, you're getting something out of it in both ways, but it's hard to express like the difference there. But there's a sort of like I almost made it like I thought of like the nature being like just be with me, just like let's hang out, let's just be together or whatever. And then the other side is like no, let's go hiking, let's go do this, let's go do that. It's almost like I don't know, like yeah, I'm just kind of re-saying what you said, I guess, but. Well, I guess I was trying to say it in my own words to say I understood it, but I get what you're saying, but I can't re-articulate it, I guess.
Yeah.
it's I think the yang part in our culture of like go out and conquer or consume or get something done, that is very common. But the yin part of like you're saying like yeah, nurture, like be calm, like let's just chill. It's almost like it's like the difference between going to Ramaco's, buying all the gear, and just going out with the purpose of coming back. And the difference is like, okay, I'm gonna go out there with the purpose of being out there and being like still and take things in, and like the nurture versus the like the just the going out and getting things done, or the accomplishment versus like just being out there to be out there.
And I would say like the harmony of those two energies of masculine and feminine, yin yang, are in the natural world all the time. So you could think of weather, the energy of a beautiful sunny day and what that does to you versus a crazy storm. Animals show us just like the diversity of energies that can, compare a wolf to a baby rabbit, or, like there's both. And to me, the harmony is finding all of that. So I love telling people, like, yes, we teach hard skills, and there's also a piece of spirituality, because for us, those two are not separate. And so we try to show up in not only what we teach, but how we teach, to honor both of those energies that are, yeah, they're just present everywhere around us and in all of us too.
Yeah, and that might be a good way to kind of slide into like holistic living approaches because that's what I feel like we're sort of talking about there. We're talking about a very integrated sort of outlook on life. We're talking about integrating the doing, the masculine, planned, structured sort of thing, and we're talking about the feminine thing that's a little bit less structured, but a little bit more about being in the experience of it all. So could you guys maybe expand a little bit on a holistic living approach and maybe what that entails?
Yeah, do you want to start?
Um, sure, I guess I don't know where I start, like to relate it to what we do. So I guess a good way to wrap it in with the nonprofit is making everything sacred. And if you can start off like that, then everything you do moving forward is going to have more purpose to it. You're not going to just willy-nilly do things if there's a purpose behind everything you're doing, whether it's like the way you get up in the morning or the food you eat. People hear holistic and it's so much kind of built into the, I guess, the diet world and then the lifestyle world. I guess a lot of times the spirituality and the practical parts of nature kind of get left out. So we hear holistic and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to eat holistically and I might have these practices, but bringing it all together, yeah, it's hard to kind of summarize, but yeah, what do you bounce off of that with me?
I I think what comes up for me and just my journey with understanding holistic lifestyle or life way, I definitely had to tap into both extremes. So the one extreme was like being in Ottawa University, just like in the school grind and learning environmental science, but like spending so little time outside because I was in a city and still having that draw. But I didn't know like the trees. I didn't know truly like the rhythms of a landscape in a year. And then the other side of that would be, maybe hiking the PCT where I was backpacking for 6 months, or when we lived at the land in 100 square foot bunkie with like very little, like our solar system was very small, no running water, no showers, no toilet, and where we really on a day to day got to see what that was like. And now I would say we're at this middle way because we were very isolated. So there's like being super tuned into technology, let's say in a city. And then when we were on the island, we were quite isolated. We like my phone had, I think, one or two bars, and we didn't have internet. Super isolated, not a lot of contact with people. And now being in Sudbury has been one way for us to integrate the beauty of both. And maybe there again is that yin yang dichotomy of like finding our middle way. And yeah, we want to be closer to people to be able to share with people. And that's been like already, I guess we landed here maybe like truly here in this home a few months ago, and the connections and yeah, just in-person contact with people that we've had already has been so much more than what we had on the island because we were so isolated. And yet that was also in some ways like needed for us to find our middle way. But I would say our connection to nature is still present. And that's in some ways the holistic living piece. We were talking today with someone about water and the difference between tap water and spring water, and how, we live in the city and yet we still are determined and persistent to travel to this incredible spring, probably once a month.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many liters we get, but it takes us
A couple hours, 3-4 hours.
to do the full trip of gathering the spring water, and we come back. And, in some ways, to some people, that might be so extreme. But for us, not only is it like incredibly clean, beautiful water for our bodies and our health, and also that connection to that spring. I mean,
I've been drinking from that water for like over 10 years and like made incredible experiences, like meeting 90-year-old couples who like the old man, he can barely bend over and they've got their like 12-year-old grandson there helping them carry jugs of water and like helping people like that out and just getting stories from locals there. Like, yeah, so my reverence and gratitude for that water is beyond what most people could imagine. Like, to lose that water source to me would be like, if you think of the connection that maybe we romanticize it, but what we put onto First Nations people, like losing something like that is like losing a part of yourself. So we're like so intertwined and connected with this water source. Like it's literally like becomes our blood within 20 minutes. So this clean water source is part of us, and now it's like part of our holistic lifestyle day to day. That's just, we've weave that in, and that doesn't just happen overnight. Just like, eating right, we all started somewhere, and you don't just, you guys started growing food. It didn't just start overnight. I remember my first experience. I was at my parents' house, and I think I just grabbed a shovel and I went in their backyard without asking, and I dug about a 6x6 patch of their grass out and threw it aside, and I just threw some seeds in there. I'm like, yeah, now we're doing it. Now we're gonna be so healthy after this, like all the food you could imagine. And like I got like maybe 1 or 2 peanuts or something out of it, but like you develop it over time, but then you integrate these pieces that in a whole, it makes up like the big matrix of your holistic lifestyle. But like she said, we're in a house. We're not sleeping on the ground, but we're going to make it all work so it's as optimized, I guess, as possible for us.
And I think another piece to that is when you spend so much time in nature and you understand your like the instinctual rhythms in your body of being an animal in a landscape, we essentially took all the parts that were like, wow, this actually gave us so much vitality. And they're quite, I would say, like simple in some ways. It's the quality of our sleep. Lighting is huge when you're in a home. Food, of course, like, yeah, food is a big topic, but water would be one. Movement, different like movement patterns that felt really good for our bodies. All these pieces that when you're in those situations that are more wild, those instincts just bubble up. There's no way you don't get the awareness of how that impacts your health. And then I would say our journey now being in Sudbury in a home is taking all those and integrating it. So that's how we still live in some ways here, and there's still a big part of our life here. We still spend a lot of time outside, but there's just more ease, versus living off grid in a tiny space with a puppy and all those fun learnings. But yeah, for us that's been a piece, and for me especially, like, yeah, being so extreme and now finding this balance. Yeah.
Well, that kind of extreme in a way, like it kind of made me think of it being like a reset in a way. And then another thing too, the idea that you were talking about making things sacred again, like having that spot where you go and you get your water, where you make the trip for it, right? But even that trip, that journey, like people make pilgrimages to sacred places all the time, right? And there's all kinds of things you can do about that, and you're super grateful, like you mentioned, when you go there and everything. So that's a sacred place, and you take care of that place, and it takes care of you, right? It's all of those things that you're talking about. To me, like, it really impresses on me how important it is to like have important things in your life. Like, you have all these integral parts that you mentioned you're sort of putting together, right? And you're building this whole life, right? And then it's a foundational thing that you build all these other things on. And you mentioned now that you've come closer to community now, and that's sort of, you have a puzzle piece that you're inserting into this now, and you're going to build on that in other ways, right? And you've got this already. You're making things sacred, and you're going to kind of continue to do that with all the things that you're going to do as you build community this way.
And I'd like to tell a story just so people can understand. So the gratitude piece is a big part, and sometimes it's easy to forget. So I was working a job once. It was during COVID. I switched a couple jobs, so I was working as a automotive mechanic, and I landed at a place that it was okay, it paid the bills, but like just at that time, it was not fulfilling me, and it was just I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel with what was going on in my life, and like I was really down about the situation, and I had some like physical things going on. I had a shoulder injury, and a lot of things were just dragging me down. And so I would take my lunches, and there was um, a small trail into like a forested area, and I kind of knew the area a bit from growing up, but not super well. But I walked back there a few times on my lunches. I found like a little creek and then little trails, and I would just get lost in the trails. Is that an eagle? I think we were getting visited by an eagle.
Oh,
Yeah.
So there's these small trails there, and then I'm just bummed out. I walk the trails, try to get my nature time, be grateful, and do the things, and then after a few weeks, I just found like a little spot by a creek. And I decided, like, you know what? I'm just gonna sit down and like try to meditate near this river because I've been training martial arts and just push, push, push. This job is just like stressing me out. I don't feel like I'm where I want to be, and just like the gratitude piece was really hard. And something just as simple as sitting at the edge of that lake or that river, sorry, and just like, okay, I know what to do. You've heard all the speakers talk about it. I've listened to enough meditation things. Like, okay, just be here, meditate. And it wasn't like it just changed my life, but in that moment, those little things of like, okay, like me, just like disconnect, phones off. I'm gonna walk in the bush. I'm gonna sit here. Oh wow, like I hear the birds. I can hear, maybe I see a snake, or maybe something splashes in the water, and just something little like that in my half an hour to 40 minutes that day was kind of like what kept me going through it. So I might not have been super grateful for the situation I was in, and it's not like the extreme of someone having to go 2 3 hours to collect their water, or I used to drive like an hour. I drive an hour into the woods and be like, okay, I'm just gonna drive, 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 and when I feel like there's no more people around, I'm gonna get out and I'm just gonna get lost, or like just be with myself and just hike and clear my head. You don't even need to go that far. It could be as simple as going out in your garden. Like, I know when I've had big gardens in the past, that's a big thing. Like, you just get out and hey lettuce, say, oh, look how he's doing, and like, oh, you might see a bird, whatever. It just like pulls you out of your thing, and you're like, wow, I'm so grateful for this. And it doesn't need to be a big part of your day. And it can be hard, like a hard time you're going through, but having that little like anchor point where you can pull back to and just be like, okay, like I got my little 5-10 minutes of like bliss, and like, okay, let's go back to the grind. But eventually, the more you do that and the more ways you find to do that in your everyday life, the more you're going to pull out in gratitude and build on that practice.
And to riff off a little bit from that, I think, especially, I would say I was one of those people where I felt like for me to be connected to nature, I need to be like super deep in the woods, like really far. And being back in Sudbury, like even just there was an eagle that came by the window, and the bird song around our home is incredible in the morning. And for us, our day programming is all going to be in and around Sudbury, because we want people to know that like this connection, you can still have it in a city. And we're super grateful. Like, Jeff knows Sudbury a lot better than me because he grew up here, but the green spaces around Sudbury that really aren't that far are also so incredible. So our programming, we're going to be hopping locations just to, yeah, I guess try out different places, and especially different, offerings will have, better suited location depending on what we want to offer. But there's, there's just amazing green spaces in Sudbury. And I would say even on the island, a challenge that we noticed there, to be totally transparent, is that the entire island is all private, not all, but lots of private property. So that ability to just go on crown land that we have in and around Sudbury versus the island is quite shocking. And so we want to share some of those like really nice spots to people, and also teach our programs there. And there's, a program like the Vision Quest, we do have a more set secluded location for that, just to hold that container. But we're excited to just be in beautiful places in and around, and maybe a little bit outside Sudbury.
yeah, no, I think Sudbury is like a really cool place in the way where you kind of get to have the best of both worlds. Like, I feel like we have a lot of people who are very outdoor oriented and like to have a very outdoor lifestyle. And I feel like Sudbury, you can kind of get lost if you want to pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's what I like too, where there's also the farming aspect and all that. Like we have so many different kind of cool things in close proximity because we have like these smaller sort of satellite communities. Then you go a little bit further out, it gets a little bit smaller and stuff like that. So all the experience you could want to have in almost any size of community is within an hour, 2 hours, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of get a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And like to go off the original thing you asked, one of my mentors said, like if you look for the magic in everything, you'll see it. So, like when you're just walking like a footpath in the city and see like a big mushroom sticking out like under a tree, like it doesn't take much to be like, oh, that looks pretty. Like there's something there. I don't know what it is, but like it just brings that childhood like ooh and awe into you. So it's having, I guess, the reverence and the gratitude, and then that'll just bleed into everything else, especially if you're crazy like us. So
And also, like sometimes I'll be walking through like a paved area in Sudbury, and I'll see like incredibly medicinal plants just poking through the concrete. I mean, what other amazing analogy of like the resiliency of the natural world and how the medicines all around us in that. And people are just like they're shocked because they, even something like foraging, again, people want to be like deep in the woods, but it's like there's actually so many medicines, so much food, like maybe on your walk to work or something, and it's just, do you have the eyes to see it? And that's the piece where it's like developing our senses, getting comfortable IDing, because like there's oftentimes this like, people call it the wall of green, and I'll use that especially with plants. And this also applies to like the gardening sphere, growing your own food. Oftentimes when people first come in, every plant looks like very similar, especially if you're not in it and you're just like, it's green and like kind of leafy, you know and then you start to dissect that, and that comes with time, of course. And just like if you showed up at a farm, there might be so many different varieties, and really understanding key differences, and then you get to see like patterns and trends. But with wild plants too, it's the same thing, but you almost have to break through this. You're just like adding layers, adding lenses to your vision, to your senses, so that you can take in more, and that you're kind of constantly scanning rather than doing this. Your awareness opens up so that you can just pick up on more, and everyone will have their own strengths. Yeah.
That's really cool because I find that super intimidating to try to learn about like foraging and stuff. And but then when you were talking about the garden, I'm like, it's true. Like a couple years ago, I would have been like, we're growing some of this. I don't know what's coming up here, but now it's like, oh, I know what's coming up. So it's kind of like you're saying, you just got to kind of start learning and it'll come to you.
Yeah, where like all weeds kind of look the same. You're just like, this is not what I planted, but it's a plant, but it's a weed.
Well, that was a big one for me too, was when I learned wild edible weeds that grow in your garden. And then you're like, oh, like this thing's kind of sucking off of this plant here, but like I know that's edible. And like this weed over there, well, I know that's edible. And then you realize like, okay, half the weeds in your garden are either edible or medicinal. So sometimes it's like, well, I might just leave that one. Like there's not really, he's in between everybody, I'll just let him be. And then you're like, okay, that one's too big, but like I know if I chop and drop that one in the compost, he's full of nitrogen. And then you learn like, oh, actually these aren't quite like weeds like we think like in modern day. It's like this is like someone competing here, but like he's still useful. Or like, oh, look, this one like makes good ground cover, so we'll leave that one. And then like, yeah, that like she says that what do you call it? Like the aperture opens up so you can bring in more light, and light is information. So the bigger you get your aperture and the longer you keep it open, the more light you're to get in. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, and foraging is the same way, because sometimes you're out and you're like, that kind of looks like lettuce and that kind of looks like that. And you're like, well, I guess it kind of is like that. And then with the foraging piece, you kind of, oh, wow, that must be in the same family because clearly all these traits are the same. And at first you might be like, it's probably nothing. And then 3 years down the road, you're like, oh, that's that thing. Oh my gosh. And then it's like a big epiphany. You're like, I've been walking past that for years, and I always had a thing about it, but I didn't know. And then you're like, boom, just made like a mentor of mine calls them allies. So when you're foraging plants specifically, they're like allies. So one year you might make like 3 new allies or 3 new friends. And then you're like, oh, okay, there's my 3 new friends. And then the next year you make like 3 new friends. And then it just expands after that, because they're not just that yang thing of like, oh, I'm going to go and consume this. I'm just going to pick this patch clean. You're like, oh, no, that's my group of friends over there. And I'm going to make sure they're taken care of. So they're there next year and the year after. So when I bring my other friends here and they can have some, and then it becomes like a reciprocal thing.
And to add on to that, one piece why we love being in nature with other people is because everybody has this own affinity to different things. And I love this part. So I would say like Jeff and I definitely have different strengths.
Dariya calls it out every time we do a program. She's like, just wait and see what they see that we don't see.
Because some people, so I guess like a difference in us, and then expanding that outward. So like Jeff has the eye for movement. So like that eagle, for example, Jeff, you know, even though we're talking to you on the screen, like his eye picked that up, and you see movement with like, well, deer, like anything
that moves in the forest, my eyes kind of just like,
will go for it.
Yeah.
And then I would say for me, sometimes this happened early spring when not even all the snow was melted. We were on a walk and I was like, look at these beautiful, they were like the tiniest, like the lichen, I don't know, maybe like this small, these like red little fluffs. And I saw it just walking and my eye was like so drawn to it right away. And Jeff was like,
I don't even see it.
You know? And then with that, like we'll have people in the program who like love insects or like,
some things are just amazing that people will be like, do you see that? And you're like, I've walked by 1 trillion times and never seen that once. But like whatever it is, the pattern, the fractal piece, like just pops out and screams to them. And like she told me the first couple times, like, yeah, it's like kind of crazy.
It's amazing.
Because everyone, it's like your gift, you know, everyone sees something differently. And it's like, wow, like I never would have seen that or never would have thought about that.
And I think that's like the strength of a community. That's the strength of a tribe or a group of people is we all have, like, we're not trying to get people to see exactly what we see. We kind of teach this basic foundation, and then it's like, let yourself experience, because everyone's drawn to different things. And I love that so much, to see what people see, because we all have,
it's when we're IDing trees and stuff, and then someone's like, what's that? I don't know. She'll be like, I'm not too sure. Never noticed it before, but we're gonna look into that.
Yeah.
They're catching you off guard sometimes too.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, with you mentioned that tribe piece, it makes me kind of think like everyone sort of falls into their natural role in a way when you sort of put the right setting there in a way, and they sort of naturally fall into that role. And you kind of mentioned basically a classic hunter and gatherer right there. The person who sees that new little bit of growth, that little thing that you might be able to eat in a couple of weeks or whatever it is, right? And then that other person seeing, oh, there's potential food or potential predator right there, right? And it's just interesting when you sort of allow the natural sort of dormant instincts to come out, they do, right? And it's I think what you maybe get out of that is like it feels right, like, you know, you just feel like you kind of feel like there's something natural, but like you just feel like you're doing partly what you're made for in a way.
Yeah, I think that's allowing, you know, when we clear all this conditioning and clutter, we become more clear conduits to just our instincts and who we are. And I think that, well, that example again is like that yin, going back to that yin yang balance of just true expression that just comes naturally. And I think in some ways, even like the male versus female body and our biology, our physiology has two different strengths, and that they're stronger when they can complement together. Yeah.
Yeah, and both very necessary too. Like that's another thing too that I hope we're starting to learn sort of as a collective people nowadays, is like I feel like for a long time it was almost like the childhood argument of boys are better, girls are better, boys are better, girls are better. It's like, no, we both need each other. Like we both really need each other.
Yeah.
Like there's essential things that we both do that are complementary, right? And we're both a mix of these yin and yangs too, right? And they're both complementary in these different ways, right? And it's it's a cool tension in a way. It is a tension, I think, but I think that's good because just like even when you build an arch, right? An arch is actually built on tension, right? They all lean on each other. That's tension. And that's kind of what things actually are. And people, I feel like, avoid tension because it's uncomfortable, or it can be, but it's actually what builds strength, what builds relationships, what builds structure, and all these other things.
Mm-hmm. And I to build off of that, what I find fascinating is there's a hierarchy. Get rid of all the baggage that goes along with that in people's minds, or what we imagine that to mean. But there's a natural hierarchy that builds in these retreats and events we do, because like you said, if someone goes out there and like they're just their gift is, like she said, it's just identifying, they see the food, the forage, or someone just, boom, they're the person you talk to, the shoulder you cry on, like, though it's not a hierarchy, like, someone's better, because if there was, say, 10 of us stuck in the woods for a month, naturally, like, you would hope we dissolve all our egos, and we give up all our childhood baggage and programming and all that, and we be real humans for a second. Some, like the natural leader, it's not that they're better, it's just like the chief wasn't the smartest or the fastest, it's who they wanted to have counsel in. So just like everyone's gonna have their gift, someone's gonna be like, wow, he is the friction fire king. Not that we're not gonna know how to do it, but he's our guy or she's our gal. Like, it's gonna, this hierarchy that not one person in the tribe's gonna be better, but someone's gonna bring their gift, and it's just gonna be like, oh, when there's kids around, they're gonna teach that gift because they're the one that's good at it. And it might not be like, oh, I wanted to be the best squirrel hunter in the tribe, but Bill always beats me at it. But I'm really good at catching the fish, or I'm like, I grow the best vegetables. It's not like an ego thing, or like, oh, I didn't get to be what I wanted to be, but I found my purpose or my strength in this group setting, and it just naturally blooms. Like, you don't have to, how's the saying go? You don't have to ask a flower to bloom, or you don't have to ask the grass to grow. It's just what it does. So, like, in a natural setting, all things being natural and holistic, those things are could just blossom up, and a lot of people come, and things they don't even realize in themselves start to blossom out in these programs, because now baggage is gone, ego is gone, distractions are gone, and it's like you see the cool little things come up. And like a fun thing we like to do with our groups is we pick names for each other. So when people come, we'll allow everyone to pick names. So we might be like, okay, what do you think we should call so and so? And this is after a few days. We try to make it like a tribe. So it's like, what's this person embodying? Like, what are you feeling when you see them? Like, what calls out? Like, what kind of energy are they giving off? And it might just be silly. It might just be like, an animal name, or it could be anything. It could be a phrase. And then like these names get put on us, and then we thrive because now we've dropped. I'm not Jeffrey. I was Wolverine once, or I was Water Bearer, and it just, then you kind of take on that energy. It's like, yeah, okay, like I can do that, and I can do this, and like it's really neat to see people come out, and like once they're out of their shell and their thing is building, and then they just, like, they become something you never thought they would, or they thought they would be. So that's a really amazing piece to see in the programs, how people evolve over such a short time period of days. And then, yeah, like, I don't know, when people leave, it's like such an emotional thing. It's like, oh my God, has it been a month already? No, it's been 10 days. And like, some people are crying, some people, it's like, yeah, like we're gonna be best buds forever. So that's a really like amazing thing to see. Just rounding, like, bring it around with that topic is like, yeah, their natural abilities and their strengths blossoming out in that type of situation.
And that's interesting too, because that reminds me of there's some stuff that I like to read that actually talks about something similar to what you're saying, where someone would take on a new name, and a new name sort of gives you an opportunity to put on a new persona, right? Yeah. And from what I understand, like person or persona, what that basically comes from is a Greek word, as I understand it, which basically means something like a mask, right? And we can all put on these sort of different personas and step into these different personas. But in the same way that, let's say we're all participating in a Shakespearean play, and one time you play Othello and one time I play Othello, we're both wearing the Othello mask, but our Othellos will be a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But we can both step into and embody that role. And then by stepping into and embodying that role, by trying to actually walk a mile, say, in Othello's shoes, you actually do get to take on some of the understanding of that being in some way. And it's an expansive experience, I think, for the being that endeavors to undertake that. So I really like that idea. I think that's really interesting because it does offer that opportunity.
Yeah, and I would say when you're with a group, we're all wearing masks, different personas with different groups, because get different groups of 10 people, everyone's going to hold a different role based on what roles are being filled or unfilled. And then I would say it's subconscious, but then to create balance and harmony, all the roles have to be played by someone. And so we naturally fill different roles. That's why when we have different groups, our names are different, because the way we show up depends on the group, and then likewise for them. And it's also a beautiful way to not be super attached, because someone calls you this name, you wear that role for a week or two, a month, and then that's it. Versus your name, there's like so much baggage attached to it, because
my mom says Jeffrey, that invokes so much more difference than when she says Jeffrey, and then like a friend at work saying like Jeffrey, like trying to like tease me and like razz me, like they all have different connotations, but like when you hear your name, you're like, oh. But then like you have this like you said, like a mask or a persona, this pseudonym that you're going by for a week. It also builds like this new level of tribe, because it's like, oh, when you're this, you'll never be this again. So it allows you to drop your mask and your like force field per se. You're like, yeah, like they don't know who I am. I can drop all my crap. They don't know I went through this trauma, or they don't know I'm dealing with this. I can just come here and be XYZ. I could be my persona, and like, yeah, you know what? I really like being like this. Like if this was me every day, I'd feel really good. So they can step into something completely different than themselves and embody this and walk away with like, oh, you know what? Like it felt really good to be like that, or like, you know what? Like I didn't like being like that. So it just gives chance for people to like step out and try something different, but also let their guard down. And when you do that, like the more of the forces of nature can come and penetrate into you, because you're not trying to impress anyone. You're not like, oh, is my boss gonna come around? Oh, is my mom coming around? Like, oh, but are the guides gonna come by and discipline me? Like, no, because we're all just chill. We have our personas. We're all just like, hey, how do we work this every day? Like, how do we function as a tribe moving through this experience together? And it really gives people a chance to really grow and embody something different.
And I think when you take on that persona, you almost take on some responsibility, and you really want to live up to that name. Like when you said water bear, I don't know if that's the reason why you were a water bear, but maybe you were in charge of the water, right? So then it's like, okay, I'm in charge of the water, so this is my responsibility. I need to make sure that everybody is drinking, and you know what I mean? Like it's probably gives a lot of purpose when you have that persona.
And that falls into the archetype piece. So where people, like she said, there's some teachers that speak about like natural archetypes that we naturally fill. So you might be in a group, and in one group you're the leader archetype, but in another group maybe you're the nurturer or the arbiter, or you're playing a different role. And we will naturally, without knowing, subconsciously, like Jungian analysts and people speak about this, we'll fill these roles subconsciously. Just in the room with body language and stuff, we'll just be like, oh, okay, this is the role I need to play right now to make this group coherent, that it's not out of control, and that we're all a threat to each other in an animalistic way. So in these scenarios, people will just automatically fill these archetypes, and they just might like, oh, okay, like you said, oh, I gotta be the person who gets the water. Okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm the person getting water. Someone else would be like looking around, like, oh, I think like I'm gonna be the mother archetype. I'm gonna make sure, food gets chopped up. I'm gonna make sure we're talking about food a few hours beforehand so people don't forget. I'm gonna make sure it gets cooked. They might not be the one doing all the work,
Yeah.
but they're just gonna fill that archetype so that the group works cohesively. And some people just naturally fall into that role. Some people might just be the like, how you doing? Like, let's talk. Like, how's it going? And some people might just fall into the role of like, okay, you tell me what to do. I'm the go-getter. I'm the doer. You need wood chopped, I'll chop the wood. And then we find these roles naturally in different group settings.
And there's also like other roles, like the jester or the like the I don't want to say shit disturber, but like the person who
The shit disturber.
yeah, there's like a coyote kind of energy, and there's generally always going to be someone who brings that in because it brings lightness. It also brings curiosity. It brings
the archetype
questioning.
of the fool.
Yeah, the fool. Like, so it's really amazing if you're in a circle where people are just open to accepting all the archetypes allowed to show up, and realizing, like, not taking it too seriously, and that we're all just playing these roles and it changes, and we can all be fools, and then yeah, you can just really get to know a lot. Again, I would say that's another expanding past like what you think your identity is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just kind of thinking about even like that shit disturber role. Like that's actually a good thing in a way too. Like I can remember in high school we had a guy that was a little bit like that, but it was kind of good in a way because sometimes when the guy was being a shit disturber, he'd say something that was a little bit true, and that's kind of why it bugged you. And it kind of shows you sometimes where maybe you're not as so big as you think you are, kind of thing, right? And so like that's kind of good too, and that is part of that fool, because sometimes the fool is only pretending not to know what's going on, right?
Yeah, or
He's just acting the wrong way. But go ahead.
Yeah, there's also like I think of other shows like the comedian, the person who brings humor. You have like the emotional, like the person who cries really easily. You'll have someone who holds space for prayer and deep sacredness. And really everyone can tap into all of those. It's just who's going to fill that role. And and also it comes with time because you get to see and honor. I think part of expressing it is honoring that part of it, or honoring that quality, that essence. And yeah, to be a true tribe, a true circle, is they all have to be able to play and dance and bring harmony and conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And they all serve their purpose in the greater whole. We don't get to 7 billion people on the planet and all these amazing things, and because there's just one type of person. Like we didn't all like, I'm just gonna hold the hoe and I'm gonna scrape the dirt and I'm gonna farm the best radishes the world's ever seen. Well, you don't get a Tesla or an iPhone out of that. You have to have some squirrely dude who's like, screw it, like it's me and pigeons locked up in a room, math equations, and like I'm just gonna start throwing chemicals together. Like you need some crazy people, then you need some like super emotional people who are like over the top, and then people are like, I'm just gonna watch these people and like write about it. Like you're not gonna get a Shakespeare and all this stuff if there's not all this like spice to life and variety in all these people. You need that all, like as 7 billion people on the planet, we're all these things, but you kind of need all of that circulating at the same time for this to stay together, or else it would just be unbalanced and we'd collapse right away.
Yeah, no, there's a couple people who talk about ideas like that. Like an old story out of the Bible is the story of the Tower of Babel, right? And it talks about basically everyone being united together. They all speak the same language, and they're building this structure so that it could reach to heaven. And so you can sort of allegorize that as saying like they have great technology, something that rivals, say, godhood in some sort of way, right? And as they become more and more alike, there's something about building that structure and being more and more alike that the forces of nature, in this case the angels, right, they come and they scatter the people, and then all of a sudden they can't understand each other. And we think that it means like all of a sudden we were both speaking English and now you're speaking Portuguese and I'm speaking Swahili. Like It's not necessarily that, but it might be the case that we're all talking to each other and we think we're the same, but we're actually not listening to each other or understanding each other. So there's no communication anymore. And so the people that were all one start to go their separate ways because they can't even understand each other anymore, even though they're in theory the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's I guess that's what role we fill in a niche of nature connection pieces, that not that it's some big evil plan or blah blah blah, but there's almost like a group think moving forward in this technology, and things kind of grow toward a Tower of Babel, for your example, where this thing is rivaling the power of nature, and the more we play with nature and stuff like that, it's like this group thinking like, yeah, like this is the way it's going to be, and everyone kind of just nods and says let's go ahead, and it keeps moving ahead. We kind of like, oh no, those things, like those archetypes, no, that's not a thing, or like, this is not a thing, and then it separates us more. And then whenever that tower starts to shake, or something happens, there's a rift in the world, like we're gonna have to go back to those individual things and building back up. And that's, I think, where we fill a role moving forward in the world. Is like, let's bring people back into nature, because that's where we're all from. And no matter how good technology is, one of my mentors says, like, you might have a picture of a tree on your phone and you think it's beautiful, but you don't have to water it, you don't have to care for it, you don't have to go talk to it, you don't have to love it. It's always going to be there on your phone. But the tree outside, you have to water it. The animals have to go there. They have to live under it, or poop near it and fertilize it, and grass needs to grow near it, and it needs to be hot or cold or whatever it needs. And then bringing people back to nature and be like, hey, let's build our life base off of this thing that we know to be true all over the world. No matter what, there's nature and there's forces of nature. And bringing people back, like, we can have the iPhones, we can have all the technology, but let's learn how to operate with this as our base moving forward. And then a lot of the things that hold us back as humans start to fall away. Your stress, your anxiety, like, I think we can all live here and prosper and live amazing lives, but if we're anxious and nervous or angry or spiteful or regretful, or all these emotions that are natural and okay, but if we're carrying that through long term into a dis-ease, and it becomes not just like, now it's just a daily burden, now it's like it's growing and growing and growing, we need to get back to like resetting ourselves and living in, like, it's holistic. I hate it because it's a good word, but it's been trampled on so well. But like, yeah, having a holistic living, you can go ahead with your job or with your iPhone or with technology or living in a city and feel better, think better, make better decisions. And when everyone's feeling better, thinking better, like happy, loves their neighbor, loves their friends, loves themselves, we're gonna have a better world no matter what. Doesn't matter if everyone's staring at their iPhone for 6 hours a day. If those kind of baseline things are operating, we're gonna move into the world, I guess I would assume, that everyone wants to see. Like, we don't want to get rid of our technology, but we want to live with it. But everyone in health and prosperity and happiness and all the good tag words you could put on an Instagram post.
Yeah. And like what you're saying too, it's kind of like, in a way, to use that sort of tower analogy again, it's like you're looking at the foundations. You're like, all right, all this stuff down here is super necessary and really good, and it's really important. Now we go another layer up. Most of this stuff is really good. We can kind of change out a couple of these pieces, maybe. I mean, I don't know. They're doing something, but they're good. And then you can kind of look as you go up the structure. You're like, okay, well, this part here, I don't know how much we need this part. This part might be actually kind of weakening the structure. We could actually probably strengthen the structure in some way here, right? And so when you look at the foundational skills and the foundational ways of being, and then you reintegrate that, like you said, into our modern world, I think you probably can alleviate a lot of the sort of ails we have in the modern world, because you're changing the way that you're sort of looking at it, right? You're like, oh, this is kind of silly, or just because, like, when, like, say you get the training that you guys are offering and you have that sort of little more awareness, or you're paying attention a little bit more, or you see a little bit more, you can't help but see it differently, right? Like you're not looking at the same thing anymore. You're looking at it in a different way, and it takes on a different, it's a different thing now. It's not the same thing anymore. It's been changed.
And yeah, I think an example that's coming up for me right now is we're becoming disembodied through the overuse of technology. So, I mean, I don't like take the Fitbit thing that you put that like tracks your, I think it does like heart rate or steps or something, or take what would be like things that like monitor your sleep quality at night, or what would be another example of like outsourcing. Now we have like these technology devices that are telling us, you know, what how we feel throughout a day, or like our stress levels throughout a day, or our activity, or how we're sleeping, rather than developing those innate senses, so that I like I know when I have a good sleep. I don't need this what's it called, the whatever, it doesn't matter. There's so many out there, but I don't need this tech thing to tell me how I'm sleeping, or I don't need my Fitbit thing to tell me how many calories I'm burning a day, when you're losing that ability to truly track that yourself. And yeah, I would say, well,
Daria loves to rip on this stuff. I'm very much I'm not a super techie person. I would say I'm more in the woo-woo health realm of things, and I embrace a lot of health technology. And she's kind of opened my eyes to maybe like where there I've wanted like some wearables perhaps that monitor your HRV and your different parameters, your sleep scores, different stuff like that. But then as I thought about it, it's like, yeah, why am I surrendering my ability? Not to say that it's not right for everyone. It might be a great start for someone. But then I realized, like, okay, like I can put in the work to be more in tune with my body, to know whether or not last night's sleep was great or not. And sometimes that's not always the case. So it's like and she would agree, it's a balance, because I've done it before where working out, go to sleep, repeat the next day, and almost as you push an extreme like that, you almost turn off the meters and gauges to know, like, am I pushing it too much? Just because you're like, humans are great at overcoming things, adversity, or just about anything. So it's easy to say, like, I will turn this off to achieve X. But in doing that, I'm blunting my ability to sense what's really going on. So, it could be as simple as
I have
like blood glucose. Yeah. Or someone who's diabetic, like if you're really deep in tune, you're going to know when you start to feel like shit after eating a candy bar or a meal. Like if you feel, oh my God, I'm feeling sluggish. And that's where a lot of like the early health stuff that I was into was all like diet logs. Write down what you ate, check your heart rate, write it down 30 minutes after what you ate, check your heart rate, and do a food diary for a month and literally mark down every food and what your heart rate is. Now it's been expedited to, you can wear a wearable and find out, did you have a good sleep? Was your sleep good? Where if you're more in your body and not surrendering yourself to this technology, you can just check in with yourself. And it might be stupid at first. It might just be like, hey, did I have a good sleep? Oh, this is dumb. Like, oh my God, why am I doing this? Oh, okay, I think I had a good sleep, or I didn't have a good sleep. But over time, that might turn into like I said, like a spiritual gratitude practice with yourself, where it's like, oh yeah, like I really had a shit sleep, or I really had a great sleep.
And I would say, so one of the topics we teach is animal tracking. So you're learning to observe patterns and also be in the mystery, whether that's a physical check on the ground or signs in landscape. And you're doing the same thing with your body. I believe that tracking is like the original scientific method, for lack of a better word. But it's that constant pattern recognition, observation, taking in, being open to all possibilities, and then in some ways choosing what is most likely, and in some ways there's always unknown. But one of like that inner tracking that we lose with technology and just culture, the biggest and obvious example that I love to use is, as kids, if we're in a class and we have to raise our hand to go to the washroom, what happens is we actually turn off signals because we're like, I can't pee right now if I have to pee, or like I have to, take a poo and I can't go right now because I'm in this setting. And so our bodies tighten up. And if you do that for years, what's going to happen is that you won't even be able to listen to that signal in your body because it's been shut off. And now extrapolate that to like
Everything.
smell, yeah, to everything, but to like smells. Some people not even or like being able to track how different foods you mentioned influences their body.
Women with menstrual cycles, like there's so many, you could just rhyme them off, I'm sure.
So the technology in some ways has, and culture, I would say it's both, but has just desensitized ourselves. So part of the practice is reconnecting with that, because especially when you go through like health history, you start asking people these questions of very specific examples of their direct experience in their body, and some people have never even tracked that, and that's pretty fascinating. And so when you start adding those layers, which we do out in nature, and then ideally that just translates to your entire life, and yeah, you just become more embodied, more aware, and then that just ripples in so many different ways.
That's awesome. It's been really great talking to you guys. We're coming up on time here because we got to go and take care of the kids here. But thank you so much for talking to us, and it was great to hear and catch up with you guys. So if people want to get in contact with you guys, they want to experience your programs, how do they go about that? How do they get in contact?
Yeah, so I would say the best place is our website, which is findingpolaris.org. We are on Instagram and Facebook, but if you want to really read about our programs and see what we're offering, definitely go to the website. And yeah, in short, we have day programs throughout the summer in Sudbury, and then at the end of the summer, we're building up to some longer term, more where there's just more depth of an experience of an offering than what you can do in a day. So yeah, I would say the website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.